Linda Harrison had watched her neighbor's strange gardening habits for 18 years, never suspecting that Robert Hayes was preparing for war. Every morning at precisely 7:15, Robert emerged from his corner house to tend gardens arranged in geometric patterns that seemed oddly functional rather than decorative. Robert moved through his yard with obsessive attention to detail, adjusting plants and positioning garden features in ways that Linda dismissed as harmless perfectionism. Linda assumed her quiet neighbor was simply a lonely retiree with too much time and an engineering background that explained his methodical approach to landscaping. What Linda couldn't have imagined was that Robert's morning routine had nothing to do with gardening, and the man she dismissed as an eccentric suburbanite was about to demonstrate that some secrets are worth more than entire neighborhoods could comprehend. The Wednesday morning that changed everything began like any other day in Willowbrook Estates. Linda positioned herself at her kitchen window with coffee, watching Robert's predictable emergence from his corner house at exactly the same time he had appeared every day for nearly 2 decades. Robert moved through his yard with mathematical precision, adjusting plants and positioning garden features according to patterns that prioritized efficiency over beauty. His landscaping choices had always puzzled Linda, who noticed that his shrubs formed geometric arrangements rather than flowing natural displays, and his garden paths curved in directions that seemed designed for rapid movement rather than leisurely strolls. When Linda occasionally mentioned Robert's unusual approach to neighbors, they attributed his quirks to professional habits that probably stemmed from careers in architecture or engineering. None of them suspected that Robert's careful attention to every detail served purposes that extended far beyond suburban beautification, and his dedication to maintaining specific sightlines throughout their development reflected training that had nothing to do with civilian retirement planning. Robert's property selection had always seemed fortunate to Linda, who appreciated having a neighbor whose meticulous maintenance enhanced the entire corner's appearance. His house occupied the elevated lot that provided clear views in multiple directions, while thick landscaping prevented anyone from observing activities inside his home. Robert's garden design created natural barriers in some areas while maintaining unobstructed visibility towards specific zones that included highway overpasses, railroad corridors, and approach routes connecting to Peterson Air Force Base. His plant selections provided year-round coverage that never interfered with these strategic sightlines, and his irrigation system included features that seemed unnecessarily sophisticated for ordinary suburban gardening. Linda assumed Robert's attention to these details reflected the same perfectionist tendencies that governed his daily routine. But Robert's horticultural expertise served objectives that Linda never considered, and his positioning of every element in his carefully planned landscape followed criteria that had been established by people whose concerns extended far beyond residential property values. The first indication Wednesday would be different came when Robert's routine changed dramatically from methodical garden maintenance to urgent operational preparation. Linda watched from her window as Robert activated systems throughout his property that she hadn't known existed, transforming decorative elements into components of what appeared to be sophisticated surveillance and defensive networks. Plants that had always seemed purely ornamental suddenly revealed secondary functions. Garden paths provided tactical movement corridors, and decorative features concealed equipment that looked considerably more advanced than typical lawn maintenance tools. Robert's movements demonstrated familiarity with these systems that suggested years of preparation rather than spontaneous improvisation. But Linda's confusion about her neighbor's unusual behavior was about to be overwhelmed by revelations that would completely redefine her understanding of suburban safety and the extraordinary people who maintain it through methods that remain invisible to those they protect. The vehicles approaching Willowbrook Estates moved with coordination that immediately distinguished them from ordinary neighborhood traffic. Linda noticed their occupants conducting surveillance that seemed focused specifically on Robert's property, and their equipment suggested capabilities that exceeded civilian requirements. These weren't service personnel or delivery drivers, but individuals whose professional demeanor and tactical positioning indicated preparation for activities that posed serious threats to residential security. Linda felt her first genuine concern when she realized these approaching vehicles contained people who appeared equipped for violence rather than routine business interactions. What Linda couldn't have known was that Robert had been expecting this confrontation for exactly 20 years, and every element of his seemingly innocent suburban lifestyle had been designed to prepare for this precise scenario. The quiet neighbor she thought she knew was about to reveal capabilities that would transform her understanding of the man who had lived beside her family for nearly 2 decades. Robert's response to the approaching threat demonstrated training that extended far beyond anything Linda associated with civilian backgrounds. Instead of seeking shelter or attempting to flee, Robert moved through his property with tactical precision that revealed extensive military experience. The equipment he accessed had been concealed throughout his garden for years, camouflaged as ordinary suburban accessories while providing capabilities that transformed residential landscaping into defensive fortifications. Robert's positioning utilized every advantage his property offered, following pre-planned movement patterns that had been rehearsed until they became automatic responses to threat scenarios. And Linda realized she was witnessing preparations that reflected decades of specialized training. But her neighbor's true background and the reasons for his extraordinary capabilities remained mysteries that would soon be revealed through events that no suburban development should ever experience. The attack began at 11:37 when coordinated assault teams moved against Robert's position using tactical formations that demonstrated professional military training. Linda watched in amazement as Robert's garden revealed its true nature through defensive capabilities that had been hidden beneath ordinary suburban landscaping for 20 years. Plant beds that appeared decorative provided firing positions and protective cover. Decorative rocks concealed weapons caches that Robert accessed with practiced efficiency. Garden paths that seemed randomly curved actually followed predetermined tactical corridors that allowed rapid movement between defensive positions while maintaining concealment from attackers. When Robert's sprinkler system activated to release chemical smoke that obscured his movements while marking target zones, Linda understood that every element of her neighbor's landscape had been designed for warfare rather than beauty. But the sophistication of Robert's defensive preparations was only the beginning of revelations that would expose the true scope of missions that protected their community through methods that remained completely hidden from civilian awareness. Robert's tactical superiority became evident as professional attackers encountered defensive obstacles that had been disguised as innocent landscape features for 2 decades. Garden trellises that appeared to support climbing plants functioned as barriers that channeled enemies into predetermined kill zones. Decorative lighting throughout his property activated as early warning systems that illuminated approaching threats, while providing tactical information about enemy positions and movements. Motion sensors hidden among his plants triggered automated defensive responses that engaged multiple targets with precision that demonstrated extensive tactical planning and sophisticated equipment integration. When these systems coordinated to create overlapping fields of defensive fire, Linda realized that Robert's obsessive attention to his garden had created capabilities that transformed suburban property into military-grade fortifications. But Robert's defensive excellence was about to be overshadowed by revelations concerning the true nature of his mission and the threats he had been monitoring from his position in their quiet residential development. The intensity of the attack escalated when additional assault teams attempted to use Linda's house as a tactical position, forcing Robert to expand his defensive perimeter to protect neighbors who had become unintended participants in his classified operation. Robert's garden design had anticipated this possibility, incorporating defensive measures that protected the entire corner intersection rather than just his own property boundaries. His tactical planning had considered every possible scenario that might endanger civilian residents, and his preparations included systems designed to minimize risks to families who lived adjacent to his surveillance position. Linda found herself at the center of a military engagement that completely transformed her understanding of community safety and the extraordinary individuals whose dedication to protecting others required them to maintain covers that concealed their true purposes from the people they served. But Robert's commitment to defending his neighbors was only one aspect of a larger mission, whose scope and importance would soon be revealed through federal response operations that documented 20 years of intelligence gathering achievements. Robert's defensive network continued revealing capabilities that demonstrated preparation spanning decades of patient development. Concealed observation posts provided comprehensive battlefield awareness that enabled him to anticipate enemy movements and coordinate responses accordingly. Communication systems disguised as ordinary suburban equipment connected him to support networks that had been monitoring his situation throughout his extended mission. Every defensive advantage his position offered had been planned, prepared, and rehearsed over nearly 20 years of careful development that balanced operational effectiveness with the requirements of maintaining civilian cover. Linda witnessed tactical excellence that proved proper preparation and strategic positioning could enable a single operator to defeat multiple professional attackers whose training hadn't prepared them for asymmetric warfare conducted within suburban environments. But the scope of Robert's capabilities was about to be placed in context through revelations concerning the criminal organizations he had been monitoring and the intelligence breakthrough his mission had finally achieved. Federal response teams arrived to secure the area after Robert had successfully defended against coordinated assault using tactics that transformed residential landscaping into effective military operations. The agents who processed the scene treated Robert with obvious deference that revealed his true status within military and intelligence communities whose operations remained classified from civilian oversight. Linda watched as her neighbor received briefings from commanders whose respect indicated that Robert's suburban retirement had been cover for intelligence gathering that achieved strategic objectives extending far beyond local community protection. When investigators began documenting evidence that revealed 20 years of surveillance operations, Linda learned that Robert's integration into civilian life had provided perfect camouflage for monitoring criminal activities that threatened national security interests. The quiet neighbor she had known as a dedicated gardener had actually been conducting one of the most successful long-term intelligence operations in modern military history. But the full scope of Robert's achievements was about to be revealed through debriefings that would expose the criminal networks his surveillance had documented and the corruption his evidence would finally enable federal prosecutors to address. The debriefing that followed revealed the complete scope of Robert's mission and the significance of intelligence he had gathered from his position in Willowbrook Estates. Robert's garden hadn't been landscaping, but a carefully designed observation post that documented arms trafficking operations conducted by criminal organizations whose corruption protection had prevented federal prosecution for over a decade. His surveillance had identified weapons smuggling networks that utilized their location's proximity to military installations and transportation corridors to conduct illegal arms throughout multiple states. The warehouse complex, located 4.2 miles from their neighborhood, served as coordination center for trafficking operations that supplied illegal firearms to criminal organizations while maintaining protection through corrupted officials whose identities Robert's 20-year investigation had finally determined. His intelligence gathering had documented delivery schedules, personnel movements, financial transactions, and communication networks that provided federal investigators with comprehensive evidence needed to dismantle criminal enterprises whose influence extended throughout multiple levels of government and military procurement systems. The attackers who had attempted to eliminate Robert were operatives from the Solano cartel, whose arms trafficking operations had been threatened by intelligence gathering that would expose their corrupt protection networks. Robert's surveillance had identified specific government employees whose collaboration enabled illegal weapons sales to continue operating with apparent immunity from federal oversight. His documentation had revealed the complete structure of criminal organizations whose protection by corrupted officials had made them effectively untouchable by conventional law enforcement methods. The assassination attempt represented desperate measures by criminals who understood that Robert's evidence would enable prosecutions that could dismantle their entire operation and expose corruption, reaching the highest levels of military and intelligence agencies. But Robert's defensive preparations had been specifically designed to protect both his intelligence assets, and the civilian community, whose safety depended on missions that remained forever hidden from public awareness. Linda approached Robert after federal teams had secured the area, but her questions about his garden activities took on entirely new meaning when she learned the truth about her neighbor's background and mission. Robert's 20 years of patient surveillance had culminated in tactical and intelligence victories that would enable federal prosecutions dismantling criminal networks whose corruption had protected them from oversight for over a decade. When Linda discovered that her neighbor's ordinary appearance had concealed classified operations that protected both national security and neighborhood safety, she understood that community protection had been maintained by someone whose extraordinary dedication required complete sacrifice of personal relationships and ordinary retirement experiences. The revelation that heroism could wear the disguise of suburban landscaping changed how Linda viewed every interaction in her community and every assumption about the people whose quiet service enables others to live peaceful lives without understanding the battles being fought on their behalf. Robert's intelligence breakthrough would become central evidence in federal prosecutions that exposed corruption extending throughout multiple agencies and criminal organizations whose illegal operations had been protected by official collaboration for over a decade. His 20 years of surveillance had documented comprehensive evidence that would enable investigators to dismantle arms trafficking networks, prosecute corrupted officials, and eliminate criminal enterprises whose influence had compromised national security interests. But for Linda, the most profound realization involved understanding that community safety had been maintained through sacrifices made by individuals whose commitment to protecting others required them to remain invisible while utilizing skills and accepting risks that most civilians couldn't comprehend. When she learned that the people who keep us safe often do so by remaining hidden, Linda understood they use capabilities and make sacrifices that enable ordinary families to live secure lives, while extraordinary individuals stand perpetual watch through methods that remain forever concealed from those they protect. Robert's mission had required him to maintain cover that prevented normal social relationships with neighbors who lived beside him for 2 decades, without understanding his true purpose or appreciating the protection his presence provided their community. His expertise in surveillance, tactical planning, and asymmetric warfare had been acquired through military service that prepared him for intelligence operations requiring patience, dedication, and willingness to sacrifice personal happiness for objectives that transcended individual recognition or civilian appreciation. The garden that Linda had admired for its unusual precision had actually been a masterpiece of operational planning that balanced surveillance requirements with defensive capabilities while maintaining perfect camouflage within suburban environments. Every plant selection, every pathway design, and every landscape feature had served dual purposes that combined horticultural beauty with tactical functionality in ways that demonstrated how extraordinary service could be hidden within ordinary circumstances. The criminal organizations that Robert had monitored from his position represented threats to national security that extended far beyond local community safety concerns. Their arms trafficking operations supplied illegal weapons to terrorist groups, criminal enterprises, and hostile foreign agents whose activities threatened American interests throughout multiple regions. The corruption that protected these organizations had compromised federal agencies, military procurement systems, and law enforcement operations in ways that enabled criminal enterprises to operate with virtual immunity from oversight or prosecution. Robert's intelligence gathering had documented the complete scope of these threats while identifying the specific individuals whose collaboration enabled illegal operations to continue functioning despite their obvious violations of federal laws and international agreements. His evidence would enable prosecutions that restored integrity to compromised institutions while eliminating criminal networks whose activities had threatened both domestic security and international stability. Linda Harrison would never view her neighborhood the same way after learning that 18 years of perceived safety had been maintained by someone whose dedication to protecting others required complete invisibility from the people he served. When she discovered that community security often depends on individuals whose extraordinary capabilities remain hidden behind ordinary appearances, Linda understood that heroes don't always wear uniforms or receive public recognition for sacrifices that enable others to live peaceful lives. Robert's 20 years of patient service had culminated in victories that would protect countless families from threats they would never know existed, prosecute criminals whose influence had corrupted multiple institutions, and restore security to systems that safeguard American interests throughout the world. The quiet man, who had appeared to be nothing more than a dedicated gardener, had actually been conducting surveillance operations whose success would influence national security policy and international criminal justice efforts for decades to come. This incredible story of hidden courage and classified dedication required extensive research to develop accurately while respecting the operational security requirements that protect real heroes whose service remains classified from public awareness. If you enjoyed discovering how ordinary suburban life can conceal extraordinary service to our nation's security, make sure to subscribe to Untold Legends Stories and hit that notification bell to never miss our daily uploads featuring amazing stories of hidden heroes whose sacrifice protects us in ways we never realize. Leave a comment telling us within us what you thought about this remarkable revelation of Robert's 20-year mission, and let us know if you've ever wondered about the secrets that might be hidden in your own neighborhood. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you these incredible tales of people who protect our freedom through service that remains forever hidden from those they defend. Tomorrow, we'll share another story that proves the most dangerous missions are often conducted by people whose heroism remains invisible until the moment they're called upon to prove that ordinary appearances can conceal extraordinary dedication to protecting others.